and just nod when it's rolling. This is Tiny, who is very difficult to take a picture of. And that's Biggie down there. Biggie, we'll give you that bad boy because I know you want one. There we go. Tiny, you're going to get this one. You're going to stay on my lap for the shot. This is their roadmap to success. Now, basically, these dogs didn't have any rules. Tiny really had some problems with potty training. His guardians made one of the cardinal mistakes of rubbing a dog's nose in it. This is an old idiom, and it does not work. It's been proven to actually make potty training more difficult. So I'd recommend we come up with a new potty training word for him. And the way we're going to assign it, as soon as he starts to pee or poop, we're going to say the word Kenya, or whatever word we want to use. As soon as he gets done, we're going to pop the treat in his mouth and say the word Kenya again. Remember, anytime we give a treat, the treat should go in the mouth, and the dog should hear the command word after it goes in their mouth. The 3 times the dog's going to be most apt to need to go after waking up, right after waking up, 5 minutes after eating, and 15 minutes after playtime starts. So if they start roughhousing around, tell Siri to give yourself a 15-minute timer. At the end of the 15-minute timer, take him for a walk. Now, he is a marker. He just marked when we were trying to go through a leashing exercise. And marking is different than having an accident. So marking is related to him thinking that he has more authority than the humans, or he's responsible for the humans. And it's easy for me to understand why he felt this way, because every time he tells the human, at least one of the humans, what to do, he gets a reward. And he gets to tell the human when to pet him. And so every time that he tells the human what to do and the human does it, he feels like he has more authority than the human. And the lack of rules can confuse the dog and think we're peers. So in order to flip what I call the leader-follower dynamic, what we need to do is start incorporating rules and enforcing them consistently. Remember, you have a window of 3 seconds to correct or reward a dog and then to make the connection. Now, it needs to be repeated a whole bunch of times, preferably in a row without a deviation from it. So the rules we suggested, one of the rules is not being allowed on the furniture, especially for him because he's marking, and that gives him more social status to sit the same height as us. So if he gets on the furniture, we're going to say off once. And as soon as he gets off, we're going to pet him and say the word off. So that way he gets a reward for getting down. And then after he gets down, then he's going to probably try, if I told him to get down, he got down here, he's probably going to try to go over here. I would flash my hand to block him when he jumped up in midair and then pull it back. Don't be standing here like this the whole time. I want you to expect the dog to do what it is you want them to do. And after if he jumps up on his own, that's when we escort him off. We tell him off once. Remember, we're only going to repeat commands one time. The more we repeat it, the less we mean it. Off once. If it doesn't happen, I put my hand behind their butt, push him firmly to the edge so he's teeter-tottering. When he feels unstable, he will jump off to regain stable footing, and then when he does, I pet him and say off. Remember, when we pet our dogs, try to pet under the chin whenever possible. And if he jumps on me like this and I pet him, I'm rewarding that behavior. So a dog shouldn't put its paws on you unless you're inviting him up. And a lot of people think it's a way of showing affection, but it can be also a way of doing a lot of other things, especially when we come home and a dog jumps up on somebody as they just arrived. That's a way of saying either you belong to me or I'm letting you know I'm in charge around here. Either one of those are inappropriate for dogs to do. Okay, so some of the rules: no furniture for at least 30 days or as long as the problem's still going on. Marking for Tiny, nipping for Biggie. Another rule would be they have to sit at the door. If I go to the door and say sit and they don't sit, I'm going to walk away. If they don't sit within 2 to 3 seconds, I walk away. I'm only going to say it once. And I wait 1 minute. Then I go back to the door and I tell them, sit. If they don't sit, then I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time for 4 minutes. Next time for 8 minutes. I keep on doubling the length of time I walk away until when I walk over and say sit, they sit. As soon as they sit, it's like the remote control in their butt that opens the door. And then I let them out the door. Now, when I go out the door, if I'm going out there with them, the human should go out the door first. Whoever's in front is perceived the leader. Whoever's behind is considered the follower. Sometimes what I'll do is put the dog on a leash and go to the door, and I'll swing it open. And then I'll stand there. I tell the dog to sit first, then I swing it open. They get up out of the sit, try to go forward, but they're on the leash, so they can't do it. Sit. Wait for them to sit, and then I swing that door open again. So this might be a ritual. Every time you go through the door, you swing that door several times until the swinging door causes a lot of dogs to lurch forward. Well, when I teach them the behavior we want, when I open the door, your job is to stay seated, and I'll tell you when we're leaving. Oh, now you're going to get in the perfect position. I was trying to take a picture of these two. This would be perfect, and now my camera's right there. So you see other rules that we can incorporate. When the humans are eating, like here, this is the table that we eat, the TV's behind us. So maybe when we're eating, the dogs are not allowed to be on this carpet around the table, just when we're eating. When we're cooking in the kitchen, the dogs are allowed to be in the kitchen just when we're cooking. The rest of the time they can come and go as they please, but not during those capacities. Let me see. We want to intercede. If we see that Tiny's doing something like biting on the back of Biggie's legs, we want to intercede at some time. Now right there, Biggie just did a good job of communicating to Tiny and saying, no, I don't want to play. Now if they're playing back and forth, that's different. But if Tiny's biting the back of Biggie's legs and Biggie's not doing anything, Biggie's saying, I don't want to play, and if we allow Tiny to do it, we're telling Tiny, yes, we're okay with what you're doing, and we're telling Biggie, you're on your own. These dogs need to mean more than anything else, they need to understand that the humans are in charge and that have everything under control. We don't need you to be in charge of security or barking or the rest of these things. I think in Biggie's case, I think because he was in Tanzania, when he transitioned from being a street dog to a home dog, he was kind of taught to be a little bit of a guard dog because that's needed, and it's not needed right now. So I think it's causing a little bit of confusion. And I think his nipping is just really his way of saying, I disagree, because we had a relative that was here that he nipped, and she was petting him, and he turned around and nipped afterwards. I can still, you can still petting this, not means I'm going to let you do whatever you want to do. So this is all perception of the dogs thinking they have more authority than they actually do, and the more that we enforce rules consistently, again within that 3-second window, the easier it's going to be for them to shift into a follower's mindset and to not think it's appropriate to go pee on the counter or to try to nip a good guest who's moving around or things along those lines. Let me see, we touched on feeding. The humans need to eat something first. If the human's not going to eat a real meal, just grab a chip or a cracker, eat it in 5 or more bites, and then give the dogs permission to eat. Now, Biggie is definitely the better behaved dog. Tiny is kind of a spoiled little dog. So what I would do is I would let Biggie eat first. When Biggie's eating, after the human who's feeding him eats at least 5 bites of something first, then when Biggie's done, we give Biggie permission to eat. When Biggie goes over and sniffs his bowl, he's on the clock. He has 3 minutes maximum to eat. But as soon as he walks away from the bowl, we pick up the bowl, we dump the food out of the bowl, and we put the empty bowl back down. It's important to have the empty bowl back down. I want them to walk by the empty bowl all day long, over and over, and recognize that there's no food there. That way, when it is dinner time and we put food there, it is much more valuable and more noticeable for the dog. If we get too much of something, it's no longer as valuable. I have this with a lot of my clients. They pet their dog so much the dog doesn't even have to ask for it. And it's no longer valuable. People win the lottery, money doesn't really mean anything to them because they have an endless supply. The dogs get petted whenever they want on demand. What's their reason to listen to us? And I'm watching Tiny behind us actually throw a little temper tantrum on the bed, digging at it. Okay, so the more that we can help the dogs by acting like leaders, by enforcing rules or controlling who eats when or what, and when he gets done eating, Biggie has to walk away. And when Biggie's eating, Tiny is now allowed within 7 feet of him. When Biggie is escorted away, then when Tiny comes over, we're going to let Tiny eat. And when Tiny is eating, Biggie is now allowed to be within 7 feet of him. This way we have control of both aspects of it. And both dogs see that we're being impartial and we're having the same structure for both of them. Let me see, I also went over ways to add structure to how we interact with them. Right now, the guardians are petting the dogs essentially for doing what the dogs want, which gives the dogs no motivation to listen to them and makes the petting and the attention not really that valuable. So right now what we're going to do is switch over to petting with a purpose, which means the dog comes up and nudges, jumps up, scratches, stares, barks at me for attention. I'm not going to give it attention. I'm going to give it a counter order. Tell it to sit. When it sits, I'm going to pet it under its chin whenever possible. Never pat on top of the head. But pet it under the chin, and I'm just going to say just sit. Not good dog, not good sit, not good boy, just sit. Or if he's already sitting, I'm going to ask him to lay down. Or if he's sitting here, I'm going to ask him to sit here. He's just going to have to do something to change his state in order to get the attention. This makes the attention much more valuable because he's earning it. It will help their self-esteem and their also shift the leader-follower dynamic. That leads me to something I call passive training. Passive training is simply recognizing the dog for doing whatever they normally do that is a desired action. Tiny just laid down on the floor next to his guardian and she reached over and petted him and said chill or crash or whatever the word is. After we do that enough, we could say the command and the dog will do it, anticipating getting the reward. But right now, for passive training, we just wait for the dog to voluntarily offer that action or the behavior first, and we recognize it and reward it. If we start petting the dog with a purpose, after a while the dog will start coming and sit in front of the human to prepay for attention. And now we've taught the dog a more beneficial or desired behavior. Sitting is a great way to ask a human to pet you. And then the flip side of that is the passive training. So when the dog does that and sits organically, we're going to reach over and pet it and say the word sit to recognize and just let the dog know, I appreciate you asking me for some attention by sitting rather than jumping up on me. Petting with a purpose and passive training, two of the easiest things that you can do if you get in the habit of doing them. Now, they're going to be hard because we just don't realize how often we do these things. So I usually use a couple of watchwords. I have the watchword of paycheck. Paycheck means I come in the room and I see someone's petting the dog who's standing. I suspect that you may have forgotten to ask, so I say paycheck. You should immediately stop petting, tell the dog to sit. When the dog sits, you pet her on the chin and say the word sit, and we can turn to our partner and say, I asked him to sit before he came in the room. Let me see. Reward would be essentially for passive training. So if I'm sitting here and one of the humans says reward, and I look at the dog and the dog's sitting, I'm going to reach over and pet it and say sit. If it's standing, I'm going to pet it and say come, because I'm assuming it just came to me. Basically, just reward just means you missed an opportunity to recognize and reward the dog for doing a desired behavior. Dogs want our attention. Good attention from us and bad attention from us, pretty much the same thing. So if their nuisance behavior gets our attention, to correct them, that's what they're going to do. Well, if we start paying attention to the good things they do, the desirable things we do, and we reward them for doing that, they will start emulating those behaviors to try to please us. And once the dog respects you and loves you and trusts you, then its number one priority is how can I make you happy? But we have to pet with a purpose and withhold affection until the dog does something for it to make it feel like it's earning it and shift that leader-follower dynamic. Let me see. Passive training, we can use a little bit of that for feeding. So I would come up with a unique command word for each dog to eat. When Biggie is going to eat, when he takes his first bite of food, we might say New York, because Biggie's from New York. He's originally from Tanzania, but you know what I'm saying. And so when Biggie hears the word New York, there's food in his mouth. When Tiny hears the word New York, there's no food in his mouth. So to Biggie, New York means eat. To Tiny, it doesn't mean anything. So it might take about 2 months before we can eventually say New York, and he goes to eat instead of us doing the hand motion. First, I always go motion, and then as soon as he starts, or tap near the floor, as soon as he starts eating, say the word New York, or whatever the word is. I like to use fun command words. New York is kind of a fun one, but I say grub, chow, feast, whatever you want to use. This way, we can give the dog unique command words, and that way we can put both of them away from the bowls, fill the bowls up, walk away, and then say New York, and then only Biggie would eat. But the human that's feeding him needs to eat something first, and 5 or more bites, even if it's just 5 tiny bites of a I was going to say chip, but cheeseburger or whatever it is. Let me see. If you go to doggoneproblems.com, there's on the masthead, there's a dog behavior column. If you look on that one, I think it's for last year, but how to introduce a dog to my baby. It's in the title. And just look through and it's like tips, I think tips to increase, to whatever it is. But if you can't find it, let me know and I can find it and send you the link. But a lot of it is like we have a baby coming. So the mom takes like one of the creams that we're going to use for the baby before the baby comes, and she puts it on her arm a little bit and wanders around throughout the day. The dog smells that, gets comfortable with that smell. When a baby comes in, all of a sudden there's a new presence, and all of a sudden these new smells are coming out: butt paste and lotion and antiseptic cream and all this stuff. Well, if we get the dogs used to all the smells before the baby comes, it makes it a lot easier for the baby. Now they're just dealing with one thing. And there'll be some other tips on that dog behavior column about bringing in a dog and introducing the dog to your baby that might help facilitate a better meeting. And we can also do a lot of things to put the dogs in a position to succeed. When mom is at the hospital and after giving birth, if the day that the baby's coming home, if maybe dad takes the dog out for a long, long walk, or we have a couple dog walkers that come by. The dogs are just walking. They get 3 walks that day. And so by the time the baby comes home, they're exhausted. Well, we put the dogs in positions to succeed by taking away all of that excess energy. They're going to be much easier for them and be accommodatable to the baby and not being so off the walls. I'd like the guardians they're exercising the dog a good amount, but I'd like to see the guardians increase the amount of exercise the dogs are getting. Start that journal. Put the date at the top, and then put each dog's name, and then write down how much exercise each dog got. And then at the end of the day, give each dog a grade. The next day, add a little bit more exercise in different capacities until you find the formula where the dog's end of the day grade is like an A. Then we know, okay, this is how much exercise we need to get the dogs. We need to bring in a dog walker, trips to the dog park. Biggie seemed to be interested in laser. We have a set of stairs. What I would do is use a laser to go get Biggie running up and down the stairs by running it along the side of the wall. If you put it on the steps, he'll lose it as it goes from step to step. And if you put it on the baseboard right above the steps, right next to him, he'll just run up and down the stairs chasing it. That's a great thing to do before you have guests come over, if you're in a pinch, or before the walk. You go out on the walk, but before the walk, we go up and down the stairs 15 times, and then we go for a walk, and you're like, wow, the walk is so much easier. We put the dog in a position to succeed. I went over how to teach the dogs to use the dog beds on command. Each dog bed should have its own designation or name. Remember to come up with fun command words whenever possible. You can say bed, but it'd be better if you say, Fiji or Cabo or, whatever, condo, palace, whatever you want to say. Let me see. The focus exercise is above is a really powerful one if the guardians master it. So I would recommend, since we have 2 dogs and one dog will be fussy if he's not getting what the other dog's getting, is one guardian practice in here, the other dog to go, guardian to go with the other dog in a bedroom and practice there. Remember, at first it's 1 second, 1 second. The guardians are kind of going like this and like this, and then the dog starts looking around. And also we have to really pay close attention to their eyes. As soon as the dog, this could be a look. It could just be the eye flutter. It doesn't have to be my whole head looking at you. And it doesn't have to be eye contact, just the dog looks at your face anywhere. So the idea is to raise it so it's a couple inches in front of your nose. The dog's looking at your face and the treat at the same time. Then you go towards the dog's mouth, and then you say the word focus after you pop the treat in their mouth. So the idea is to get them looking in your face for longer periods of time. In that video, I kind of went through all the outlines, but make sure you practice it inside until you can do it anywhere inside with 1 second, or 1 second the first one and 20 seconds the next one. Then we're going to go out in the balcony. We're going to go back to 1 second, 1 second, and then get back up to the 20 seconds on the second movement outside on the balcony. Then we're going to do it on the walks. When we do it on the walks, again, we do it with no other dogs around at first and no people around. So it's just as easy as possible. We shape that behavior. And when we're walking, we're not going to stop. We're just going to say focus. The dog looks up at us. And the dog's on this side. I'm going to say focus as I'm walking and pop it in the dog's mouth. So we're going to be walking and focusing simultaneously. This way, if you're about to pass someone, you just get in a habit of saying focus. The dog looks up at you. I actually know somebody who, a dog trainer is not the most sophisticated. Her word was ignore. So as she passed people, she didn't want the dog to bite, so she would say ignore. And that's the command word. Well, now every time she passes someone, she says ignore, and people turn around like, what the hell did I do? So focus is different. The dog, and it's really powerful command. It's pretty cool if your dog's not paying attention to you and you say focus, the dog stops and looks up at you. You're like, wow, your dog really pays attention. You're like, of course, we hired a dog on problems. But no, it's just one of those things we're just teaching our dog to look at us, and it's a great way to redirect their attention. Let me see. Escalating consequences. Remember the first one? Hiss 1 time per incident. Always, 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 always start with the hiss. We have a level 1 hiss, like it's to a level 10 hiss, which is more like a we see a response there. So you have to meet or exceed the dog's energy level for them to understand it. Always start with your hiss, because eventually that's all you'll have to do. But if that doesn't work, the second thing is we stand up abruptly. I just threw a treat into, I forgot what was the name of the dog bed? So the guardian right now is petting the dog for no reason. So this is another great example. She just did it out of love and affection. But again, that's what we have to do is start, now the dog's putting his chin on her. So right there, tell him to sit.
Sit.
Only once. Now just put your arm across your belly, there you go, and just continue filming. You do it my way or you don't get what you're asking for. I'm not gonna ask you, I'm not gonna get mad, I'm not gonna repeat it. And as soon as you do it, you get rewarded. And as soon as the dog recognizes, as soon as I comply, I get rewarded, he's going to start complying faster and faster, and this is what shifts the leader-follower dynamic. Remember, if the dog is in your way and standing, walk through the dog. Don't walk around the dog. That's a human niceness, but that tells the dogs they're more important than us. Going back to the escalating consequences, the first one we do is we're going to hiss 1 time per incident. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to stand up abruptly and turn to face the dog. Our authority goes whatever direction our belly button is pointing. So keep pivoting until the dog is stationary. Try to do it without moving your feet. As soon as the dog stands, sits, or lies down, take 2 steps backwards. Left foot, or right foot, left foot, and then pause 1 second, then go back to doing what you're doing. That pause is important, and only 2 steps is important. And facing the dog, all of it's important. And that's the second consequence. Pause 1 second, then you can go back to doing what you're doing. The third consequence is to stand up abruptly and to march directly at the dog. If you're already standing, just march. Don't slow down and don't stop when you reach the dog. If you get to where the dog is, bump into the dog. The dog needs to learn to get out of your way, which is why I just got done talking about that. But this is confrontational to a dog, and this is approachable sideways. So if the dog's doing something you don't want and you march directly at it, you march at it until it tells you, I'm no longer challenging you. It'll do that by turning sideways away from you. As soon as it doesn't turn sideways, you freeze, stop immediately. Put your feet together, and then you go to the second consequence. You're pivoting until the dog's stationary. Take those 2 steps backwards, pause 1 second, go back to doing what you're doing. The only time that we would not stop marching at the dog when it turns sideways is if it is in a designated no dog zone. So we have a little carpet around the couch here. One of the rules is the dog's not allowed to be on this carpet when the human's eating. Well, if the dog invades the carpet and I stand up and march at it, it turns sideways right away, but it's still in the carpet, I would ignore that and keep bumping into the dog, and I would stop when I get to where the edge of the carpet is. That's how we establish an invisible boundary. So don't slow down, don't stop, and don't delay on it. Use these, and you can combine these. You might, if you drop some drugs here on the floor after surgery, you might hiss, stand up, and rush to the dog all simultaneously. That's a stronger message. The key is to always start with your hiss, because eventually you're going to collapse back to all you'll have to do is a hiss. The fourth consequence I have is what I call a leash timeout. I put the dog on a leash, I step on the leash as far away from its collar as the distance from the collar to the dog's tail. So in Biggie's case, about 3 feet away, and in Tiny's case, about 2 feet away. Now, sometimes they'll throw a temper tantrum. Don't say a word. Just stand on the leash. As soon as they get done, they will sit, and they'll sit as far away as the leash allows. And dogs have something called an opposition reflex, so it's going to be a tense leash. And if I leave it tense and I take my foot off, he's going to feel it and move away. And as long as the tension's there, he's going to continue to pull. So as soon as the dog sits here, I take the foot that's on the leash and I slide it with the leash towards the dog to take the tension off the leash. I do not tell it to sit. I wait for the dog to offer that behavior on its own, because when I'm doing that and it sits, it's saying, I'm challenging you less. So as soon as it challenges me less and sits down, I take the foot off, the slack off the leash. Then I wait for the dog to lay down. And again, I don't tell it to do it. When it lays down very subtly and it's calm, I take my foot off the leash. I don't tell it good job, I don't pet it, I don't detach the leash. Any of those 3 things tells the dog we're done. Now at this point the dog is free, but the leash is still attached. When it gets up and walks away, it's going to be dragging the leash. That is dangerous unless the dog is supervised, because you get caught on something. So, but as soon as the dog gets up and moves away, if I take the leash off and it misbehaves again, I got to reapply the consequence. Careful your finger. There you go. So I wait a minute or two, and if the dog is good if it misbehaves or runs by me, it's going to nip somebody. As it runs by, I step on the leash and reapply the consequence. Or if a couple minutes go by and the dog is good, then we detach the leash. It's not quid pro quo. But what we're saying is, if you're going to be defiant, you lose all freedom. I warned you not to do it by hissing at you. You did it anyway, so I stood up. You did it again, so I marched at you. You did it again? Now you're being defiant. The consequence is you lose all freedom. And freedom is restored when you return to a completely calm and balanced state of mind. It's dispassionate, it's not mean, it's just setting the rules and the structure for the dogs. They know exactly where they're at and what happens if they do the wrong thing. This is how we disagree, but remember, the better thing to do is to, whenever possible, use the positive reinforcement. So if the dog's on the couch, we can push them to the edge so they're teeter-tottering, but my preferred way would be to take a treat out and toss it on the ground. As soon as the dog gets down, we pet it and say the word off. So we create a vocabulary. Something else I'd like the guardians to do is teach the dogs how to have a directional command. This is very easy, but very underutilized. For dogs, the worst punishment is to be excluded from the group. So if we're here and the dog gets underfoot and we're like, get out of here, or our anger, or our body language and our delivery tells the dog we're not happy, and the action of asking the dog to move away tells them we're not happy. Well, teaching a dog how to leave a room in a beneficial way is easy. What I would do is I would just simply go touch the dog's nose with a treat. As soon as it's interested, and I'm in a doorway, I would toss it so it's about 3 feet outside on the other side of the doorway. When the dog walks over and licks it off the floor, I'd say the word out. And I would do that 2 or 3 treats here, then go to the baby room and do it 2 treats there, go to the bedroom, go to the kitchen. So that way, every part of the house, you've practiced teaching the dog how to leave the area. Later on, when you're nursing and the baby's there, it's getting too close, you can say out. If the dog's approaching the baby, you say out, the dog knows what you mean. So that's a really powerful one. Another thing I'd like the guardians to do is practice the drop command. To do the drop, what we do is we wait for the dog to have a toy they are allowed to have. And they're chewing it in their mouth, not holding it. So I've got this in my mouth. I'm not going to put this in my mouth. Raw hides. You shouldn't use raw hides, by the way. They're not very good for dogs. They're bleached in pneumonia and all sorts of stuff. But if I'm a dog and chewing this, you hold it in front of me, I'm going to try to take it with this in my mouth. Once I figure out that's not going to work, I'm going to drop this. When I drop it, don't go for it. Pop the treat in their mouth and say the word drop. And then you can walk away and go back to doing what you're doing. The dog will pick this thing up and start chewing on it again. If you have another treat, go over and do the same thing. What you want to do is teach the dog with what we call low-value items. I'm allowed as a dog to have this at all times, so it's not particularly valuable to me. But a baby toy that I'm not allowed to have becomes a forbidden fruit. So if we teach the dog to drop with low-value items, and the dog has a high-value item, we say drop, and they spit it out to get that treat. Now we just took all that stuff away from them. Instead of them chewing up the baby stuff, we made it easy for them to comply. Let me see, the leash technique. The dogs get excited for leashing, and Tiny, went over and peed when we were doing this. So what I would suggest is in the short term, get belly bands for Tiny. Before we put him on the leash, we attach the belly band. Now, then we would use the technique I'm about to describe here. The leash technique is basically for dogs, whoever's in front is perceived to be the leader. So if I get up and I march to where the leashes are, and the dogs recognize what I'm doing, they're going to run in front of me and go all the way to the leashes and say, I'm here, let's go. Well, as soon as the dog walks in front of me, I turn and walk away and I sit back down. I don't disagree. I don't get mad. I just lose interest in going for the walk. This is helpful if you do this at times when you're not planning on taking the dog for a walk. So when you turn around and go back to watching TV, you're not out anything. So eventually you'll have to interrupt over and over again. Do it at times where you just have a couple minutes to kill. Eventually you'll be able to walk all the way to where the leashes are kept. Once I get there, then I tell the dog to sit. As soon as the dog sits, I start reaching my hand for the leashes. I probably won't even be able to touch them. When I start reaching for them, the dog's going to wiggle, get up, and get excited. Remember, excited is an unbalanced state of mind. If you want me to go for a walk, my rules demand that you stay seated. So as soon as the dog gets out of a sit, we lose interest, walk away, sit down, watch TV. This is, again, another reason why it's beneficial to do it at times when you're not going for a walk. Eventually, you get over there, and you'll be able to tell them to sit, and the next time you do it, you'll be able to reach a little bit closer to the leash, a little bit closer, a little bit closer, and a little bit closer. Eventually, it gets to the point where you can grab the leash, and they stay seated. And at any point they can jump up or get out of it, put it away. Now, if it's too difficult to do it with both dogs, sometimes one dog will cascade into the other, then I would put one of the dogs away and practice with one dog at a time until each dog knows how to do it without the influence of the other dog's mischievous behavior. Eventually, you want to get to the point where you go over, take the leash off, attach to the dogs, and stays calm and seated, and when we walk out the door, we're going to have the energy your dog has in the house is the energy they're going to have outside the house on the walk. So taking the time to teach the dog how to be calm and balanced before we go for the walk will pay off big dividends on much better walks. Now, because the dogs are reactive to dogs on walks, the focus exercise I showed you is actually something I got in a book that's specifically designed for dogs that are reactive to other dogs. So the idea is the same principle. When a dog is approaching, you tell the dog to focus, it looks up at you, and you're giving it the focus command. Now, here's the thing. If you're walking down the street and you don't see the dog until it gets fairly close and your dog is reacting to that dog, that's what we call above threshold. So if that's the case, we want to increase the distance between the dog. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
We want to increase the distance between the dog and whatever it's reacting to. Sometimes you have to go around a shrub. Sometimes we have to go around a car or something like that to block the dog's distance. But increase the distance until the dog will stop reacting. And so anytime that's the case, we want to increase the distance so the dog wants to stop reacting. I'm going a little bit longer in this video than I normally do because the family has a child coming in. I want to give as much stuff as we can so we hopefully don't have to do another follow-up session. Putting the chin on a knee or something like that is a way of asking. I would still ask the dog to sit before I petted it. And remember, only say it once. Okay, I'm probably forgetting some other things. If I forget anything or there's something we didn't go over or you have a new problem, I want you to call me or text me. I can help you, usually by sharing a video that I've done with another client that will show you the technique you need, but only if you let me know. If I don't hear from you, I assume everything's going great. All right, well, this is Biggie and Tiny's Roadmap to Success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you need it.